From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Something new is on the menu.
We think that if chefs at restaurants sell these kind of products, the consumers will learn to eat them.
See some new to you seafood in Louisiana. New details about how avian flu is spreading among dairy workers and why it may be spreading more widely than first thought. As USDA makes another adjustment to corn and soybean yields.
I think it is a surprise to the market.
What it could mean for prices going forward right now on AgDay.
AgDay is brought to you by Pioneer. Pioneer brand corn has game-winning statistics like a 10 bushel per acre yield advantage. Pioneer brand corn, your best year starts here.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. USDA continuing to fine-tune the 2024 harvest, cutting both corn and soybean yields and ending stocks. The agency releasing new estimates in its latest supply-demand report. Now, it lowered corn yields by 0.7 of a bushel to 183.1 bushels to the acre. That carved 60 million bushels from the production forecast. Soybeans also seeing a yield cut by more than a bushel, dropping production by 121 million bushels. Now, checking ending stocks for corn. Stocks are down to almost 2 billion bushels. Soybeans are lowered 80 million bushels from last month to 470 million bushels, and wheat at 815 million bushels. That's up 3 million bushels from last month and up 17% from a year ago. AgDay's Michelle Rook joins me. Michelle, those ending stocks, especially for soybeans, were below what the trade expected.
Yeah, that's right, Clinton. Ending stocks for soybeans and corn were both lower due to USDA's bigger than expected cuts in yield and production. Now, while this was mildly bullish compared to expectations, market analysts say the U.S. and global balance sheets still indicate adequate supplies and limited upside to prices. USDA provided some mildly friendly revisions in the November reports. The biggest was the cut in soybean yields by 1.4 bushels, tied to dryness late in the growing season and harvest. USDA cut yield by 2 bushels in Illinois, Minnesota, and South Dakota, and 3 bushels in Iowa. That dropped soybean production 121 million bushels, yet it was offset as USDA lowered exports by 25 million bushels and crushed 15 million. So ending stocks dropped just 80 million, still ample.
And now you got a bean carry out around 470 million, less than what we think. But the reality is it's still relatively comfortable, especially when you look at the world supply. Even with this revision, you're still looking at, I believe, the highest raw stocks carry out for beans on record and either the first or second highest stocks use on record, assuming Brazil has this trendline yield crop.
Corn yield was lowered 0.7 bushels per acre to a record 183.1. Illinois saw a 4 bushel cut, Missouri 3 bushels, offset by Indiana, which was up 7 bushels, and North Dakota up 5.
I think it is a surprise to the market. It was lower than the average trade guess. And it was a little bit lower than I thought. I thought the bean corn yields held in a little bit better than the beans did in harvest, but that's what the government got. And I think in general, it's probably pretty accurate.
But again, production and ending stocks were lower, just 60 million bushels. So McCormick says it's not a big price mover.
In general, the carryout coming in below 1.9, I believe, is a little bit friendly, but I'm not ragingly bullish corn.
Wheat balance sheets were nearly unchanged. U.S. ending stocks were up 3 million bushels, with global stocks down 0.1 million metric tons. I'm Michelle Rook reporting for AgDay.
All right, thanks, Michelle. President-elect Trump already moving forward, naming key staff positions as the ag industry adjusts to new leadership. Fuel prices and oil production are key agenda items for the incoming president, but what will that mean for biofuels? Now, former U.S. ambassador to the UN agencies for food and agriculture, Indiana farmer Kip Tom says the administration understands the importance of biofuels and its potential to lower cost to consumers, adding that nationwide E15 or even E20 access is likely to be on the table. Since leaving office, the fuels industry has invested heavily in oil crush capacity for renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuels. Now, Tom says current cooking oil imports need a second look, however.
I think one of the things that needs to happen on day one is the Secretary of Agriculture, whoever that may be, needs to step up and say, wait a second, we're going to stop buying this used cooking oil from China, subsidizing it to put into our sustainable aviation fuel. And those subsidies, if they're going to do that, at least ought to be coming to somebody producing that oil crop here in the United States. So There's a lot of places where I think we can bring and add to the U.S. economy, and at the same time strengthening farms and ranches across the country.
Tom says as crop production continues to climb, so will the availability of feedstocks for biofuels, adding that it's a long-term opportunity for energy security. Former U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer could be returning to his old post under a second Trump administration. The Financial Times reporting several people familiar with discussions inside Mr. Trump's transition team say Lighthizer has been tapped to return to the role as top trade negotiator. However, the article says it's not clear if Lighthizer will accept the role. President Trump has said his administration would renegotiate the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement and raise tariffs. Federal health officials are calling for more testing of employees on farms battling avian flu. That's after a new study showed some dairy workers had signs of infection even when they didn't report feeling sick. Now, the CDC says blood tests of 115 workers on farms in Michigan and Colorado showed that 8 workers had antibodies that indicated previous infection. Officials say the findings suggest the virus may be spreading more widely. 4 of the workers reported feeling sick and 4 reported no symptoms. Researchers reported barriers to testing, including the reluctance of some farms and workers to participate in monitoring. So far, 46 farm workers have been identified in the country as having the virus. Health officials continue to say the risk to the public remains low. Southern California firefighters working over the weekend to contain a wildfire that has destroyed dozens of structures. The mountain fire started last Wednesday morning in Ventura County and had grown to 32 square miles. It was 7% contained Friday morning. At least 88 additional structures have been damaged. Some 10,000 people were under evacuation orders, many people also working to evacuate animals. As the fire continues to threaten structures in suburban neighborhoods, ranches, and ag areas around Camarillo in Ventura County. A winter storm slammed into northeastern New Mexico on Friday, dumping snow on Albuquerque and surrounding areas. Crews at one point were forced to close a section of I-40 due to a crash. Blizzard warnings were in effect. At last report, 37 inches of snow had fallen near La Veta Pass in Colorado and 36 inches in the mountains northwest of Santa Fe, New Mexico. Meanwhile, it was a damp weekend up and down the East Coast with rain tracking from Louisiana to Maine. Meteorologist Jack Van Meter joins us with a look ahead to this week.
Taking a look at our radar, we are noticing 2 different systems moving throughout the country. The first one is just exiting the East Coast, so we can see, thankfully, giving a lot of moisture, especially, like I said, to the East Coast where there's going to be levels of drought and obviously finally breaking some of those long-standing days without rain. We saw some of those red flag warnings that were issued last week finally expire. Good news there, high pressure builds for the middle of the country, again, for the beginning of the week, but we are looking at a couple systems that actually will be bringing some snow to the parts of the Pacific Northwest there, so something to keep in mind there. And then another cold front is going to develop by the middle of the week and bring some more rain to especially the Great Lakes states. So again, it's something that we're keeping a very close eye on, but look at the pattern that keeps on repeating itself. We're doing that trough ridge situation over and over, and take a look at this huge area of nothing. What this denotes is obviously a large area of high pressure, which is going to be clearing out any chance for any sort of precipitation.
A busy news day continues with a look at how markets closed following USDA's latest reports. That's next. And later, the search to find the next great seafood dish. We'll find out what could be headed to plates in Louisiana next. Union Pacific is building a new terminal in the heartland to move all kinds of goods, including grain. The company saying it plans to open a new intermodal terminal in Kansas City. It's being installed on existing Union Pacific property, and the company says construction is already underway. It says the terminal will handle both domestic and international containerized shipments of grains, consumer goods, refrigerated products, and pet foods. This is the 4th new intermodal ramp Union Pacific has built in the past few years. Now, the goal is to open it next year. In 2022, U.S. railroads moved more than 4.5 million tons of containerized grain, with 300,000 of that originating from Kansas City. CNH Industrial on Friday missing third quarter profit estimates. The farm and construction equipment maker also cut its whole year profit forecast due to weak demand and a cut in dealer inventory requirements. It forecasts its annual adjusted profit in the range of $1.05 to $1.15 per share. That's down from the $1.30 to $1.40 forecast earlier. CNH now expects annual sales in its ag segment to be down between 22% to 23% from a year earlier, instead of the 15 to 20% it once predicted. USDA's latest report did little to change direction of commodity markets Friday. Michelle Rook has more in Markets Now.
Well, corn and soybeans did close a bit higher after the WSDA on Friday. Ellen Brugler is back with us. And Ellen, we did have lower yields. We had maybe a little bit lower ending stocks in both corn and soybeans than expected in the WSDA, but kind of a muted reaction. Why?
I think we had anticipated somewhat lower yields for corn and soybeans. The USDA did surprise us on the bean side. They were lower than expected at 51.7 bushels, but the market had rallied into the report, and I think we were coming into the weekend. There's a lot of money being siphoned off into the stock market right now, and just kind of reacted to the bullish news, and then the short-term traders were taking some profits ahead of the weekend.
So do you think the fact, though, that we were able to lower ending stocks by 80 million bushels on beans and 60 on corn, is that enough to at least say that maybe the bottoms are in?
I like the technical action on the beans. You know, we had that low in August, and then we rechecked it, and then we've rallied out of that. Now we have a more bullish fundamental scenario than we did when we were testing the bottom. So it kind of says, if stocks are tightening, the big funds probably aren't going to build short positions, at least in the near term. They like and prefer to do that when ending stocks are rising. But there's a limit to how far we can go, because we just 480 million bushels of bean ending stocks is still pretty loose. And on the corn side, 1.8s and 1.9s are not where you need to be to get back above $5.
Yeah, what will it take to keep a rally going now that we've got the election, the WSDA, some of those big things out of the way? What are we going to need?
I think exports are the focus now, and that's often the case after you get past the harvest. I think we've seen some pretty decent export numbers. A lot of daily sales announcements, that type of thing. I think you need to keep that ball rolling into November, and the rest of November and into December.
Yeah, thanks so much for being with us, Ellen Brugler with ENN Economics. We'll have more AgDay coming up.
Here's a look at our drought monitor, and something that we are noticing, and again, it's going to be the East Coast is specifically very, very dry. They are only in the levels of abnormally dry, that large yellow coloration there, and actually some moderate and severe droughts, especially just north of New York City. One of the main reasons, again, those red flag warnings were issued, but it looks like a lot of moisture will be moving through that part of the country again from last weekend and then the continued week ahead. So very good news there. Moving out west in parts of the central part of the country, still dealing with those widespread extreme droughts, especially just west of the Dakotas there and into Wyoming too. That drought is starting to spread, but going all the way out to the west coast there, we can just see a lot of dryness. But good news is, again, a few more systems are in the forecast to drop some well-needed moisture. Here's our jet stream. By the middle of the week, we can see that large ridge really setting up in the plains, going all the way up into Canada. As we put this in motion, we can see our next trough really starting to dig down just north of Oklahoma there and into parts of Kansas. And that's going to be our next cold front, giving a lot of the country, especially the Great Lakes states, and then once again the East Coast, another shot at moisture, so to help their drought situation. As that exits, again, another ridge sets up, that trough ridge situation, and then dealing with another low pressure system moving out. Here's our November precipitation outlook, and as we can see, an above average chance of of precipitation, again, all the way down to Texas through a lot of Illinois as well. So very, very good news there, but take a look at the below average. Again, going to be parts of the East Coast there. Temperature outlook actually going to pretty much mirror that with above average temperatures again for much of the East Coast as well. Holland, Michigan, a high of 56 degrees and a low of 36. Freeland, we can see 54 degrees, dealing with some showers and a low of just 46 degrees. And Duluth, Minnesota, 44 degrees and a low just above freezing at 33.
Skid steers get a lot of work done on the farm. Machinery Pete has the latest pricing trends for this important piece of equipment next. And if you love seafood, stick around. We'll show you how the folks in Louisiana are working hard to expand seafood menus in the country. Like the rest of the used ag equipment market, the price of skid steers are changing as well. Machinery Pete takes a look at demand for this workhorse on the farm.
Well, used skid steer values have been sliding lower here in 2024. And folks, I think the main reason is we're just seeing so many more used skid steers sold at auction. I think on the construction side of the business, with building slowing, that's driving a lot more used units back onto the auction market. Now let's take a look at one that sold last Tuesday, November 5th, on an auction in Seven Valleys, Pennsylvania by my good friends at McGrew Equipment Company. They sold this very sharp 2018 Kubota SVL 95 2S. Now it only had 472 hours on it, sold for $46,500. Well, actually, that's quite a bit above the current average auction price this year on the SVL 95 2S, and that average is $31,343. But interesting to note, folks, that average is actually down 25.5% versus last year's average auction price on the SVL 95 2S, which was at $42,073. And folks, if we back it up 2 years, the average auction price is actually down 36.1%. Back in 2022, the average was just up over $49,000. Now, of course, back in 22, the used skid steer market was absolutely on fire, and here in 2024, again, not so much. Now back to Kubota SVL 95 2S's. Actually, so far this year, the number of them sold at auction is up 34%. So not surprising to have that average auction price be dropping. And folks, I think the rest of November through December, we're going to see a lot of good late model used skid steers being sold at auction.
All right, thanks, Pete. Well, seafood restaurants tend to focus on menu favorites. Next, we'll see how experts in Louisiana are working to expand those menus and introduce new seafood options in the country.
Machinery Pete on Ag Day is brought to you by Firestone Ag. Firestone Ag now offers Bridgestone tractor tires, the ultimate lineup of tires engineered to deliver enhanced wear life, durability, and ride comfort on the road. To learn more, talk to your local certified Firestone Ag dealer.
Louisiana is known for having some of the nation's best seafood, and as LSU Ag Center correspondent Craig Gautreaux reports, efforts are underway to expand items on the menu, even reintroducing some fish species.
Shrimp and crawfish are key ingredients in many Louisiana seafood dishes. But what about garfish, or buffalo, or gaspargou? Many years ago, these species were staples in many home-cooked meals. Agents with the LSU Ag Center and Louisiana Sea Grant are trying to bring them back to give a boost to the Louisiana seafood industry.
We're not limited by one species or one flavor. There's a lot of things that we can do and recombine our heritage cooking methods and add some of these new species to it and come up with some amazing products.
The good news is there is a plentiful supply of these fish in Louisiana waters. To help market them to consumers, local chefs are being invited to a workshop to help them see and taste the potential of these underutilized fish.
So we want to create awareness. We think that if chefs at restaurants sell these kind of product, the consumers will learn to eat them.
Because the seafood industry is struggling economically, the field day highlighted ways producers can increase the value of their catch and better market their product.
You're trying to look for things that you can do to add value to your product to be able to sell it and make good money on it. And I would tell you that the best thing that people can do is get a business plan.
A selling point of these fish is they can be prepared many different ways.
So you take a chef with these ingredients that are low cost input ingredients, and turn that into a product, and somebody's going to do something with this. And so we're opening the door to help them discover that.
Participants at the event also got to see several machines demonstrated that could help add value-added products to their inventories. With the LSU Ag Center, this is Craig Gotro reporting.
All right, thanks, Craig, and that's all the time we have this morning. And we want to say Happy Veterans Day and thank you to all who served. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day on the farm.